I feel like people have a tendency to treat themselves pretty crappy sometimes. There are exceptions to this. There are people who treat themselves a little too well and are a little vain, but that's not the majority of people. I feel like the majority of people experience a lot of shame and a lot of struggle and disappointment. We have a tendency to place our experiences as indicators for what we are. If we grow up experiencing a lot of people saying negative things to us or about us, we can really internalize that. And if we grew up, making a lot of mistakes and doing a lot of things that we regret, we can really internalize that. If we grow up and we're constantly feeling pressure to do better, do better, do better. It's never good enough. There's constant criticism there. It can really get internalized. We learn this language as we're growing up when we speak to ourselves that's very degrading and it's very self-deprecating. And we treat ourselves like crap. In reality, that's not the truth. But it feels like the truth because that's what we've been aware of our whole lives. I've had to, in my own life, try to change my language just slightly to help with this issue. When I was little, when I was in first grade, 5 years old, I wrote a little thing and I still have it to this day. And I didn't know I still had it to this day until I was about I might have been 31. It was pretty long into my adulthood when I realized, oh my gosh, I found this thing and I didn't even realize I had it. And it was this cute little thing that they had us do in first grade where they were having us write things about ourselves. So it was my favorite animal is my dog. My second favorite animal is my bunny. And all of this is misspelled, obviously, because it's first grade. And it had sections for what you want to be when you grow up and what you feel like you are now. Mine said, what's your biggest hope for the future? And mine said to be good. And it said, what is your biggest fear? And mine said to be bad. And it said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And mine said, someone who's brave. And it said, what is the thing that you don't want to be when you grow up? And mine said, a slave. It kept repeating like that. It kept being well, when do you like yourself the most? When I'm good. When do you dislike what you did? I'm bad. And I had this very, very painful experience as an adult reading my child self having written this stuff. And the thing is I know what my living circumstances were when I was 5. I know what kind of fear I lived in. I know what kind of torture I was experiencing because I grew up in an extremely abusive household. I grew up with a lot of domestic violence, almost daily. I internalized that very strongly. And I can even look at myself as an adult and I can recognize that I still feel like I'm bad. I still feel like I'm a massive inconvenience to everyone around me. I still feel like I'm the problem. Automatically, I'm constantly trying to do a good job and trying to make it up to people that I am there in their presence that, I know I'm not great. I know I'm not so awesome. Constantly trying to do nice things for people so that hopefully they'll forgive me for not being very awesome, for being bad. I strive every single day. I wake up and I choose to be a good person because I'm trying so hard to tell myself, to convince myself, I'm a good person. I'm not bad. Automatically jumping to, you're a failure. Automatically jumping to, you're not good enough. You're not enough. You're not desirable. You're unlovable. You're bad. You're a disappointment. It is language that is super unkind, and yet we talk to ourselves like that a lot. We tell ourselves stuff like that a lot. When I read that, when I saw that, again, here I am somewhere around 30, and I'm like, holy crap, I still feel the same way as when I was 5. I'm still talking to myself in the same way as when I was 5. I've got to start talking to myself different. This isn't okay. It's not okay. And eventually I came to a point where I realized I was inviting people into my life who would talk to me that way, who would treat me that way, who would reinforce what I had evidence of truth for, so that there would be even more evidence of it being true. I picked really negative relationships with people who took advantage of me and treated me like crap. My friends, the majority of them, were not people that I would end up actually being close with long term. I constantly was trying to help people. I have volunteered years of my life in hours trying to help people, trying to make up to the universe that I exist, that I take up space in it, because how dare I? How dare I stay here and be a detriment on the world? Like, I have done a lot of stuff based on that feeling before, trying to get to a point where I could ever reach that goal, that childhood goal of just being good. And I realized I have to change, because I can't just go my entire life feeling this way. I haven't made any progress since I was 5. That's not great. Like, that's not a good thing. 25 years later, and I have not made progress on this particular subject, you know? So I looked up some things, and at first it wasn't really very helpful. So I just started trying things. I would take what I could use out of learning something and then just set aside whatever I couldn't use. And I kind of do that in general. I try to be aware that almost everything isn't good or bad. Almost everything has some good in it and some bad in it. There are some things that are flat out good or flat out bad, but they're rare. They're not the norm. The majority of things have good and bad in them. So I started saying to myself, the majority of things have some good and some bad. I can watch this movie. There's parts of this movie that suck. The acting was terrible. The plot line was not plausible at all. This is like, who wrote this, you know? But there's good things. There's like, oh, well, the special effects was fun. And, you know, it was at least flashy and entertaining. You know, like, you can get, there's good, there's not good, you know? You could encounter a movie where the budget was teeny tiny, but man, was the writing excellent. And yeah, the special effects are crap. Yeah, they obviously had a tiny budget, but holy crap, is that well done. You can do that with anything, not just movies. You can do that with yourself. So I started doing that with myself. I'd encounter a situation, and at first initial reaction is, I'm crap. I messed up. Obviously, I'm crap. But after a while, realizing at that particular moment, I was crap. But maybe next time I won't be. And I got to where I did this by saying, instead of saying, I messed this up, saying, it messed up this time. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm bad at this. Instead saying, I'm inexperienced at this. Instead of saying, I failed, saying, I'm gonna learn from this. Which is a hard one for me, but I say it. Instead of saying, I'm the common denominator in everything that's gone wrong in my life, recognizing that I'm also the common denominator in everything that's gone right in my life. Actually giving yourself credit when you do something well is a lot harder than beating up on yourself when you do something bad. And again, bad is such a harsh word, but it's the word that I perpetually had going on. I unfortunately was called and told very horrible things by the person who brought me into the world. So I've got plenty of words that are negative toward myself that I've had to try to adjust. I've had to try to do tangible, real-life things to give myself evidence that that's not true. And when you're building up evidence, it's like building up a building. Except when you're building up evidence that's positive, you're using just little bricks. And when you're building up evidence that's negative, you're using big old cement blocks. So that's my own personal analogy. My father was a bricklayer. That's how I think of it. You can think of it however you want, but I've heard people before describe it as like frosting a cake or painting a wall, and the layers of paint are thin when it's positive and thick when it's negative. Or frosting the cake is, just as quick, easy royal icing when it's a positive, but it's thick buttercream when it's negative. You can think of it however you need to. It takes almost twice as much positive evidence to counterbalance negative evidence. And if you grew up in a situation where negative evidence was constantly being put forward and presented to you, someone was constantly degrading you, criticizing you, critiquing you, being negative toward you, treating you like crap, whatever it is, it's super hard because you've already got all these layers already built into a structure. And you've got to very slowly build a structure next to it that feels minuscule because you've already got this building over on the side that's looming. It's big. It's already there. You didn't even build it. Someone else took their freaking mortar and built that building. But you still gotta present yourself with evidence that is positive. Even though it's slower, even though you gotta start from such a horrible position where your building is gonna be tiny in comparison for years. If you don't start at all, it will never happen. There's some people who swear by manifesting and by, saying that these positive things to themselves and that it'll make it happen. I have never found that to be true personally. I can say all I want. I am a millionaire. I am a billionaire. I am a powerful entrepreneur. Whatever. I can say that all I want. It's not. There's a part of me that's like, ha ha ha, so stupid, so that's so fake, like, that's not realistic. There's a tiny part of me, no matter how much I'm trying to believe, that is like, yeah, no, this is hokey, I don't buy it. It's because I put so much stake on reality. I need to be realistic. And so I have found much more productive to add reality to very strong biases. Just the same as when I'm watching, say, a news thing, or I'm reading an article, or whatever it is. If someone's really biased, I try to pull that back and be like, okay, but let's be realistic. Oh, everyone in this group is so terrible. Well, is everyone in that group that terrible? Really? Maybe statistically we should look this up, because this sounds like an opinion. If someone's saying something and they're using the words always or anything that's like sealing something in an extreme direction, oh, people always treat me this way, or everyone is like this, those are really extreme statements to me, which means they're probably not true. They're an exaggeration. They could be based on something that the person has experienced or based on a real statistic, but to jump to every single time or always or 100% is an extreme, and so it has to have some sort of resource to back it up. That's how I look at it. So I have to do that with myself. Saying I'm always bad, I'm just bad, that's an extreme statement because it says an extreme thing. So then I have to act like there's a commentator inside of me who said that, and that I'm critiquing the bias of that commentator. In reality, here are evidences of things that make that maybe not true. It doesn't mean I've never done anything bad. I am extremely, acutely aware of my regrets and my things I wish I could have done better. But I can't judge my past self because my past self was doing the very best that they knew how to do at the time. And hindsight is 20/20. I cannot judge the knowledge that I had then based on the knowledge I have now. I didn't know any better. I was literally trying my hardest. And maybe no one else can recognize that, but I know me, and I know I was trying my hardest. I messed up. It doesn't change that I messed up, but I can forgive myself because I know I was trying my hardest. And I have to say to myself, what did I learn? I messed up. So how do I avoid that situation in the future? How do I keep from doing that again? How do I make it so that there's a change and it doesn't become a pattern of behavior and it's a one-time occurrence? How do I make it one time? Because if it's only one time, then going forward, when my brain jumps to that moment, I have evidence on the other side to counterbalance it, and I can say, well, not 100%. maybe it was then, but it hasn't happened again. Maybe it was then, but I learned to do it differently. Sometimes I do things that are bad, but that doesn't mean everything I do is bad. Sometimes I do things where I am disappointed in myself. Other people get disappointed in me a lot. I have to accept that, and I have to counterbalance it with, well, here's times that I was proud of myself. Here's times that people were proud of me. I'm not always a disappointment. The majority of my life, I had a lot of evidence that I was unlovable. That evidence sadly got substantiated by multiple people. And I grew up in a lot of isolation, which meant I was not given any other evidence counter to that. That was beyond a certain point. And so I could believe that someone could love me as like, you know, a certain degree of love, like an amount of love that they would give to anyone that was nice to them. And I viewed most people as an acquaintance, that most people could love me as far as they would love an acquaintance. They didn't wish bad on me any more than they would wish bad on their coworker or, you know, the other kid at school or whatever. They didn't hate me, and that was as close to loving me as they could get. That was as lovable as it was possible for me to be. I tried to accept that, and I couldn't, and so I just kept being in cycles of massive depression, going through bad relationships. I had to get to a point where I realized that I was perpetuating what I understood to be true, and that I was so reinforced with evidence of it that I was just building up more. I had to try to get to a point where I could be like, well, maybe this person loves me a little more than that. And that was a very difficult place for me to even get to. It took like decades to get to that point of my existence. And I'm still at the maybe. But the maybe is better than 100% all the way unlovable. Maybe certain people in certain situations could love me more than that. It would be awesome. I have this tiny little hope that I've had since I was a toddler that someday someone could love me all the way. Like unconditional love. And that I could experience that for real. I don't know if I ever will, but I still hope for it. You know, I love people that way, so I know it's possible because I give it. I've seen evidence before of people who love me quite a bit, and I've had some positive reinforcement as far as that goes. So I've been able to slowly start building a structure up, but there's a freaking skyscraper for the whole unlovable thing. It's been a very long, slow process, even getting to the point where I could start building the other structure. It's not that big. And right now, it's getting sturdier, but every once in a while the wind blows a little bit and it wobbles. And it feels very fragile, like a souffle. It could come in at any moment, it could fall down, but it's slowly building. Eventually, maybe someday it could get really strong and sturdy, like one of those homemade loaves of bread with a really thick crust, and it's still soft and gooey in the middle. It's still got all the warmth and wonder in the middle, but it's really hearty, heavy bread. My structure can get solid and, you know, have really good steel beam structures inside. I really hope for that someday. But I wouldn't have even been able to start if I didn't change the language of the commentary going on inside of me. And you can't change it all the way. You can't just go from I'm terrible to, oh, I'm awesome, and actually believe that. At least I sure freaking couldn't. And I've known tons of people who couldn't. So I genuinely believe it's a common thing, which means it's an important thing to change the language to be more in the middle of the spectrum instead of an extreme. Instead of saying, I ruin everything, accepting I didn't have enough knowledge right now to do better. And that sucks, because it wasn't great. What can I do to try to avoid this in the future? I guess I need more knowledge. Totally mess this up. Right now. Right now, I'm not capable of more. But that doesn't mean it has to be forever. And it sucks when you start out with barriers in the first place. It sucks when you start out with that buildup in the first place. It is horrible to have to overcome that. It could be a lot of things. For a lot of my life, I had an undiagnosed disorder, and I just had like this health thing going on, and I thought I'm just limited, and I just need to accept that. And then you look at people who are in like wheelchairs and playing sports or the Paralympics, and you're just like, man, they didn't accept that. How do I find a way to be more like them? How do I do that? And the only way that I have found that has worked for me is slightly changing the language. And lo and behold, when I didn't completely give up, when I wasn't completely hopeless about it, got a diagnosis, I'm doing amazing. My health has been improving so well. I just needed to get to the right thing. And it took so long and so many doctors to get to the right thing. It was an arduous thing. It was not easy. It took a lot. But holy crap, does it make a freaking difference? So it's not forever. Whatever your barrier is, it does not have to be forever. Slightly change the language. There's definitely barriers. I am not trying to invalidate that in any way, shape, or form. I'm trying to say living a life that's completely hopeless, it's not really living a life. You don't have any quality of life living that way. And it might seem completely out of reach and unrealistic for this big giant goal to be there or whatever, for this thing that you secretly dream of and ache for. It can be so far-fetched to you. So do a maybe. Do a little in-between thing. I'm not bad, I'm just inexperienced. That leaves a crack in a window. If you're inexperienced, that denotes the suggestion that you could get some experience. I messed up this time. Denotes that maybe, just maybe, next time you might not. Right now, I don't know, means that it's a possibility that at some point you could know. Changing the language just slightly. In a matter of just a few years, doing that repeatedly with myself has gotten to a point where I don't have to be as conscious of it. It's starting to become more integrated, and it has taken several years to get to that. It is not an, do it for, 30 days and then it'll be integrated into your system. It's not one of those things. It's not something that becomes a habit in like 3 months. Not when it's really ingrained in you. Because you're trying to talk to your basically your self state. In psychology, it's called a self state. It's basically you on autopilot. When you're not paying attention anymore and your body's just doing the things that habitually it is, compelled to do, it's called a self state. And that self state, it can take a lot of really hard work to train your subconscious. It can take so much effort to get to where you are making any effective change on that automatic pilot part of you. It's not fast, but it can change. It can make progress. It can get to a higher functionality. You can do it. And that tiny, tiny little smidge of hope can make just enough difference that change can happen.